I've said before, we've been here before in the case of Boris Johnson, but things feel certainly a lot different than to last time. And in my last video about this, we said, is this but the beginning of the end of Boris Johnson, or are we at, the end of the beginning? And it's really difficult to really say, but a lot of people have said, and this isn't, Labour MPs or Lib Dems or anything like that. It's Conservative MPs saying, this feels like, the end of the regime, the end of, the administration. So when they're saying this, you sort of really have to sort of start paying a bit more attention to it and being a bit more, this is interesting, because ultimately at the end of the day, it will be the Tory MPs to decide whether Johnson goes or not. And as we discussed yesterday, we looked at that, the breakdown of the numbers, because as I always say, it's not just the letters to the 1922 committee, it's what comes after that, the vote of no confidence. Because if those MPs who want to get rid of Johnson fail, then he's safe for a year. They can't get rid of him for a year. That's how the rules work. And I think their worry is if they don't get rid of him, what could happen in between that year? He's got like a year of safety. But we've heard all this stuff about there's more worse Partygate stuff to go. He's been fined. It's going to cause an absolute disaster at the local elections. And I keep on telling people, the anger out there is palpable. Completely, it's there. It's boiling quite big and long, and he's ready to bubble over. And I think a lot of people are going to take their opportunity at the local elections to, stick it to Boris. And that is going to come at the expense of the local Tory party. And even those people who are not in the parliamentary party are not going to be happy at being sacrificed for, Boris Johnson's, grand mistakes. They are not going to be happy about that. And that's going to cause trouble in the party as well. So the answer, obviously, to when Boris Johnson's when he goes, I think will be, settled when we have, if anything, the local elections. But we'll have to see how it all rolls out. So into this article now, because when you've got senior Tories starting to say, Boris needs to go sooner rather than later, then we start to get into some interesting territory. So, as always, before we do go jumping into this article, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and a one-up-to-date link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do support the channel that way. So, on with the article. So, this comes from The Guardian with the title of Boris Johnson should go sooner rather than later, say top Tory MPs. Plans to ditch Boris Johnson as the Tory leader and Prime Minister sooner rather than later, without even waiting for a clear and obvious successor to emerge, are being now advanced by a growing number of senior Conservatives. And this is one of the things that a lot of Conservatives were really worried about. Who's the successor? And that was stopping them, a lot of them, from either sending that letter or not being, calling, as voraciously for him to go, saying, he's done wrong, but he's apologized, and that's as far as they were willing to really, admonish Boris. But now that you've got this talk of let's just get rid of him, we don't care if there's a clear successor, because we'll have a leadership election and one will emerge. That's where it becomes interesting, because now there's a lot more, Tory MPs going to go, we just need to get rid of him, and we can worry about who comes next afterwards. So anyway, it continues. Amid the mounting alarm, of course, at the effects of the Partygate scandal could have on their electoral chances, high-ranking MPs are now urging wavering colleagues not to dither because of their worries about the succession. or Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but rather to strike before it is too late. One former minister told The Observer, "Things have changed. There is now a feeling that we can't defend what is going on and that we can't delay any longer because of the succession or Ukraine. If we don't act well before the party conference in October, it will be too late." After another disastrous week for Johnson, during which, again, MPs of all parties agreed to set up their own investigation whether to have deliberately misled Parliament, MPs say several prominent successors are now stepping up to campaign, and even preparations for canvassing and support, including, you'll have heard these names before, Liz Truss, obvious one, we've been, she's been there since the beginning. Penny Mordaunt, which we've talked about Penny before, and of course, even Jeremy Hunt's in there as well. And of course, last night, Mark Harper, the former Tory chief whip, who last week called for Johnson to go, told The Observer that he understood why some colleagues wanted to delay acting until after the party investigations were complete, or for other reasons. But he urged them to have confidence that an excellent successor would emerge during the process to elect a new leader, even if it was unclear now who that would be. "I have seen enough to reach a conclusion that the Prime Minister needs to go," Harper said. "My colleagues can be confident that we have a very talented people and very robust processes for selecting a new leader, and that will ensure we get a capable, credible successor who can then set out an alternative proposition and ensure that we can win the next election." He added, "I think the facts that will mean that a majority of Conservative MPs will reach that conclusion that the Prime Minister needs to go." Another former cabinet minister said that doubts over the succession were now irrelevant, and there was such an urgency of the situation that a broomstick would be better than the one we have at the moment, he said. So you can even tell there are a lot of people who just want to get rid of him as quickly as possible now. The mood has swung dramatically against Johnson last week, as he was again forced to apologise to the Commons for being fined after attending a lockdown birthday party in 2020, and then appeared to back attempts to even order his own MPs to block an investigation into whether he had deliberately misled Parliament by previously denying the parties had even taken place. Many Tory MPs are indeed waiting on the results of the May the 5th local elections before deciding whether to send a formal letter of no confidence in Johnson, the chair of the Backbench 1922 committee, Sir Graham Braidley. If Braidley receives the 54 or more such letters, a vote of no confidence has to be held, and if Johnson loses, he must step down. The problems are that have recently engulfed the previous and most favourite to succeed Johnson, the Chancellor Rishi Sunak, over his wife's tax affairs, and the fact that he was fined for breaking lockdown rules, are seen as having destroyed his chances of following Johnson into number 10. The Tory leader, Lord Hayward, agreed that the mood had changed and that succession issues were less likely to hold MPs back. "I get the impression that because people have moved from whether the positions were into a more sceptical proposition, they now believe it's just got to happen and that we've got to have a conversation about who's next when it happens. There are those people moving to reach that point of no return, even though they're not sure who the alternative would be. It's a question by judging when the moment arrives." Another senior Tory MP said that lots of colleagues have local elections going on and have been hearing, "I like what you're doing as our new MP, but we can't vote for you while that blithering idiot is in office." I spoke to several MPs this week who had earlier taken their seats from Labour. They all said the situation was terrible. They're starting to say it's not whether, but when, and of course it doesn't matter who, as long as it's not him. Johnson insisted that on a 2-day trip to India that he would be able to lead his party into the next general election. But the Partygate scandal has bogged him down through all that visit. And shortly before his return to London on Friday, it emerged that the Metropolitan Police had started to issue fines for another party that he has attended. In this case, the Bring Your Own Booze Garden event on the 20th of May, and Number 10 said they had not been fined for attending the event, although it was impossible to say whether he would be in the future. Opposition party leaders said that it would be unacceptable for the Prime Minister to hold back that information about whether he had been fined ahead of the local elections. Labour's deputy leader Angela Rayner said there can be no hiding place for a law breaking that includes Downing Street. Boris Johnson must keep his promise and declare without hesitation if he has been given another fine for his breaking on his own lockdown law, if he has withheld the truth from the British public for far too long. So, as you can see here, this is going to drag on until Johnson goes, Partygate ain't over. And even after Johnson goes, there is no guarantee, of course, that this still doesn't drag down the Conservative Party, or at least hurt the Conservative Party in a lot of ways. A lot of ways. And I can tell you now, being in the Red Wall, those Red Wall Tories are panicking like crazy. And I'll tell you now, there are a lot of people who, again, voted Conservative, held their noses and voted Conservatives because they didn't want Corbyn in and Brexit. But they're now like, well, we've seen what the Conservatives have done. It's not exactly been a good choice to do that. So a lot of those seats are going to go back to Labour. Of course, it's a question of how many. And even if, over half of them do go back, that's still not going to be a good result for them. Because even then, if they do keep that half, I guarantee you, when you look at the rate at which they won them, they didn't win them with an overly comfortable, easy majority. They were very, very close majorities of about 2,000 to 3,000. And in a general election for an MP, that's not a lot. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.